The crystal chandelier cast fragments of light across the ballroom, each sparkle a reminder of everything I once couldn't afford to dream about. 20 years. That's how long it had been since I'd walked these halls, though back then, I'd been pushing a mop bucket instead of holding a champagne flute. I stood in the corner, my fingers wrapped around a glass of water. Still water, room temperature, exactly how I'd trained myself to prefer it in places where sand got into everything and clean water was worth more than gold. The Fairmont Hotel had outdone itself for Westbridge Academy's 20th reunion. Same marble floors I'd scrubbed until my knees bled, now polished to mirror perfection, reflecting designer shoes that cost more than my mother made in a month back then. Sarah? Sarah Mitchell. The voice sliced through my observations like a scalpel through silk. Jessica Chen, now Jessica Rothsworth MD, according to her name tag adorned with a small photo of her surgeon husband and 2 photogenic children. Oh my God, you actually came. Her surprise was genuine, which almost made it worse. She air-kissed somewhere near my left ear, enveloping me in a cloud of perfume that probably cost more than my first car. I almost didn't recognize you, she continued, her eyes conducting a swift inventory of my simple black dress, my minimal jewelry, my practical heels. The assessment took less than 3 seconds, but I caught every micro-expression. The slight widening of her eyes, the tiny downturn of her lips, the way her shoulders relaxed when she concluded I posed no threat to the social hierarchy. You look, well, she finished lamely. Before I could respond, Marcus Fitzgerald materialized beside her, still wearing his class president's smile like armor. Time had been kind to him in that specific way it favors those who peaked early. His hairline had retreated, but his confidence hadn't. His middle had softened, but his voice still carried that particular tone of someone who'd never been told no. Sarah Mitchell, he said, drawing out my name like he was remembering a particularly amusing joke. I have to admit, I'm shocked. Didn't think that you'd be able to make it. The pause before be able was deliberate. We all knew what he meant. Didn't think you'd be able to afford it. Didn't think you'd have anything to show for yourself. Didn't think you'd dare show your face among your betters. Life has a way of surprising us, I said quietly. Marcus laughed, that same bark that used to echo through the hallways when he'd knock my books out of my hands. That it does. Hey everyone. He raised his voice, champagne sloshing dangerously close to the rim of his glass. Sarah Mitchell's here. Remember Sarah? She used to, what was it again? Oh right, she worked in the cafeteria. Janitor, someone called out. She was the janitor's kid. That's right. Marcus's grin widened. Still shopping at discount stores, I see. He gestured at my dress with his champagne flute. Some things never change, right? The laughter rippled through the growing crowd like a stone thrown into still water. They gathered around us, these people who'd made my teenage years a careful study in survival, their faces flushed with alcohol and the particular cruelty that comes from never having to grow past who you were at 17. Remember when she showed up to the spring formal in her cafeteria uniform? Someone chimed in. Said she had to work right after. Because I did, I said, but my voice was swallowed by their mirth. And that time she tried to run for student council, Jessica added, caught up in the momentum of collective memory. The campaign posters made from notebook paper. At least I didn't have my daddy buy the election, I said louder this time. The laughter stuttered, stopped. Marcus's face darkened for a moment before he recovered, raising his glass higher. To success, he proclaimed, his eyes finding mine with laser precision. And to those who, well, let's just say not everyone can be winners, right, Sarah? The room erupted in uncomfortable laughter, some genuine, some nervous, all of it washing over me like acid rain. I stood perfectly still, a technique I'd perfected in places where movement meant death, where patience meant survival, where silence was its own form of power. Come on, Marcus, someone said half-heartedly. That's enough. What? I'm just being honest. We're all thinking it. He took another sip, emboldened by alcohol and audience. I mean, look around this room. Doctors, lawyers, CEOs, success stories. And then there's... He gestured vaguely in my direction, letting the silence finish his sentence. I gripped my water glass tighter, feeling the cool press of it against my palm. The sensation grounded me, pulled me back from the edge of saying something I wouldn't regret, but they would. Because the thing about Marcus, about all of them, was that they still saw the world through the narrow lens of Westbridge Academy, where money meant merit and cruelty was currency. They had no idea what success looked like when it was forged in places where failure meant flag-draped coffins. "Nothing to say, Sarah?" Marcus pressed. "You used to be so quiet. Guess that hasn't changed either." I met his gaze steadily, saw myself reflected in his pupils, small, contained, controlled. "I learned a long time ago that the most important conversations happen in rooms you'll never be invited to, Marcus." His smirk faltered slightly, but Jessica laughed, high and bright. "Oh, how mysterious. What, did you become a spy or something?" If only they knew how close to the truth that was. "Something like that," I said, allowing myself a small smile. "Right," Marcus drawled. "Well, whatever pays the bills, I suppose. Though judging by that dress." He let the implication hang in the air like a poison cloud. I thought of the dress hanging in my closet at home, the one with the subtle bulletproof lining, the one I wore to state dinners and classified briefings, the one that cost more than Marcus's car but looked like nothing special, because that was the point. I thought of the stars on my shoulders, hidden now under civilian clothes. I thought of the president's direct line programmed into the phone in my purse. "You're right," I said finally. "Some things never change." I took a sip of water, tasting nothing but remembering everything, the metallic tang of fear in my mouth the first day of school, the salt of tears I'd learned to never shed in public, the copper taste of blood from biting my tongue to keep from screaming at the unfairness of it all. Marcus raised his glass one more time, victory shining in his eyes. "To Sarah Mitchell," he announced. "Proof that not everyone gets a happy ending." The champagne bubbled over the rim of his glass, drops falling onto the marble floor like tears. I watched them fall, remembering other liquids on these floors, my mother's tears when she couldn't afford my textbooks, my own blood when Jessica accidentally pushed me down the stairs, the industrial cleaner that burned my hands but never quite cleaned the contempt from these halls. "No," I said quietly, so quietly they had to lean in to hear. "To Sarah Mitchell. Proof that the best endings are the ones you never see coming." Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced now. Something in my tone, perhaps, or the way I'd stopped trying to shrink myself into invisibility. The crowd began to disperse, drawn by the appetizer table and the promise of easier targets. But I caught the way some of them glanced back, uncertain now, as if trying to reconcile the girl they remembered with the woman who stood before them. Jessica lingered, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her champagne flute. "So what do you do now, Sarah? Really?" "I serve," I said simply. She laughed again, that tinkling sound that used to make me feel like broken glass. "Still, oh Sarah, some people just never—" "Excuse me," I interrupted, pulling out my phone as it buzzed with a specific pattern. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. The emergency signal I'd hoped wouldn't come tonight but somehow knew would. "I need to take this." I stepped away before she could respond, moving through the crowd that parted unconsciously, the way crowds always parted when someone walked with the kind of purpose that came from years of having somewhere important to be. As I reached the terrace doors, I heard Marcus's voice rise again behind me. "She probably couldn't even afford the dinner. Bet she's leaving before they serve it." I pushed through the doors into the cool night air, lifted the phone to my ear and listened to words that would change everything in approximately 7 minutes. They thought my silence was submission. They had no idea it was strategy. The terrace was empty, the city lights below blurring into a constellation of earthbound stars. I ended the call and stood there for a moment, letting the weight of what was coming settle into my bones. 7 minutes. That's all the time I had left to be nobody before I became exactly who I'd always been. The night air carried the faint scent of jasmine from the hotel gardens, and suddenly I was 17 again, kneeling on these same marble floors with a scrub brush in my hand and shame burning in my throat like acid. 20 years ago, the scholarship letter had felt like winning the lottery. Full ride to Westbridge Academy, the most prestigious private school in the state, based on my test scores, and an essay about watching my father die from cancer, while my mother worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I'd written about how education was my only way out, my only chance to become something more than another statistic. What I hadn't written about was how my father, former Army Ranger turned janitor, had made me promise something on his deathbed. "Sarah Bear," he'd whispered, his voice ravaged by the disease that had eaten him from the inside out. "They'll try to make you small. Don't let them. Be quiet if you have to, be invisible if you must, but never be small." I thought I understood what he meant. I was wrong. My first day at Westbridge, I wore my best outfit, a dress my mother had found at Goodwill and altered with her own hands, staying up past midnight to make sure the hem was straight. I'd ironed it 3 times that morning, polished my second-hand shoes until they almost looked new, brushed my hair until it shone. It took exactly 47 minutes for them to destroy me. "Oh my God," Jessica had said, not even trying to lower her voice. "Is that polyester? I can smell it from here." The laughter had been a living thing, crawling over my skin like insects. But it was Marcus who delivered the killing blow, approaching with that politician's smile already perfectly formed at 17. "You must be the scholarship kid," he'd said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't worry, you'll fit right in. I think the janitor's closet is down the hall." By lunch, everyone knew. The charity case, the poor kid, the one who didn't belong. By the end of the week, I'd learned to eat alone in the library. By the end of the month, I'd taken the part-time job cleaning the school after hours, not because I needed the money, though we did, but because it was the only time I could walk these halls without feeling like prey. The memories cascaded now, unstoppable. Jessica accidentally spilling her lunch on me every Tuesday, always tomato soup that stained. "Oh, Sarah, I'm so clumsy, but at least you work in the cafeteria, right? You can clean up." Marcus posting my rejection letters on the bulletin board, every single one with helpful commentary. "Maybe try community college?" he'd written on the Harvard rejection. "I hear they have great janitor training programs." The winter ball, where they'd voted me most likely to peak at minimum wage, as a joke award they'd created just for me. The day I'd found my locker filled with mops and cleaning supplies, a note that said, "Know your place," taped to my textbooks. But the worst part, the part that still woke me up some nights in cold sweats, wasn't the big cruelties. It was the small ones. The way conversation stopped when I walked by. The group projects where I did all the work but got none of the credit. The teachers who looked the other way because Marcus's father donated a new wing to the library. I'd learned to move through their world like a ghost, silent, invisible, leaving no trace except gleaming floors and empty trash cans. I did homework in supply closets, ate lunch in bathroom stalls, existed in the spaces between their notice. "You're not nobody," my mother would say, holding me while I sobbed into her shoulder. "You're my somebody." But her somebody still had to face them every day. Still had to smile when they demanded it, disappear when they commanded it, shrink myself to fit into the narrow space they'd allotted for me in their world. The night of graduation, while they celebrated at country clubs and yacht parties, I sat on our apartment's fire escape and made a decision. I wouldn't try to join their world anymore. I'd build my own. Back to the present. The terrace door opened behind me and I didn't have to turn to know who it was. Expensive cologne and casual cruelty had a specific scent. "Running away already?" Marcus asked. "The night's just getting started." I turned slowly, studying him in the dim light. 20 years had added weight to his frame and lines to his face, but his eyes held the same casual contempt, the same absolute certainty that the world was ordered correctly with him at the top and me at the bottom. "Just needed some air," I said. "Right." He moved closer, champagne glass still in hand. "You know, Sarah, I've been thinking. It must be hard, coming to something like this. Seeing how far everyone's come while you're still." "Still what, Marcus?" He shrugged, a practiced gesture of false sympathy. "Look, I don't mean to be cruel. It's just, some people are meant for certain things. You were always good at cleaning. There's no shame in that. Someone has to do it. My father used to say that dignity wasn't about what you did," I said quietly. "It was about how you did it." "Your father," Marcus scoffed. "The janitor who thought he was a philosopher." "The Army Ranger who became a janitor to feed his family," I corrected. "Purple Heart recipient, Bronze Star, a man who understood sacrifice in ways you never will." Marcus's face flushed. "Don't get defensive. I'm trying to help." I could probably find you something at one of my properties. The cleaning staff always needs. I have a job, I interrupted. Right, you mentioned serving. He said it like the word tasted bad. Waitressing? Something like that. He laughed, that same bark from inside. 20 years and you're still serving other people. God, that's almost poetic. You know what? I take it back. Some things do change. At least in high school, you had potential. Now you're just... He gestured vaguely. Sad. I thought of the last 20 years of the things I'd seen and done and become. Of the first time I'd fast roped from a Black Hawk under fire. Of the village in Afghanistan where I'd held a dying child while calling in medical evacuation. Of the classified operations that would never make history books but had changed the course of nations. I thought of the stars on my shoulders, earned in blood and sacrifice. Of the president calling me by my first name. Of the Joint Chiefs standing when I entered a room. You're right, I said finally. I am still serving. The difference is, I chose it. Whatever helps you sleep at night. He turned to go, then paused. You know what the funny thing is? I actually felt bad for you once. Thought maybe we were too hard on you. But seeing you now, still nobody, still nothing, I realize we were right all along. Some people are just meant to be forgotten. He left me there on the terrace, the door closing with a soft click that sounded like a coffin lid. I stood in the darkness, counting my breaths the way I'd learned in sniper school. 4 in, hold for 4, 4 out, hold for 4. Control the breathing, control the mind. Control the mind, control the outcome. My phone buzzed. A text this time, coordinates in a single word, urgent. 5 minutes now. 5 minutes until the carefully constructed nobody I'd presented tonight revealed herself as somebody they'd never imagined. I thought of my father, of his promise extracted from a dying man to a terrified girl. Don't let them make you small. I'm not small, Dad, I whispered to the night air. I'm just very, very quiet. The jasmine scent grew stronger, carried on a wind that felt like change coming. Inside, I could hear them laughing, toasting their successes, never knowing that the girl they'd tried to bury had clawed her way not just to the surface, but to heights they couldn't even see from where they stood. I closed my eyes and let the last of the memories wash over me. Every slight, every cruelty, every moment they'd tried to convince me I was nothing. I held them all for a breath, then let them go like dandelions in the wind. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't 17-year-old Sarah Mitchell anymore, the scholarship kid who cleaned their floors and ate their contempt with a smile. I was General Sarah Chen, and in approximately 3 minutes they were going to know it. I learned to be forgotten. It was the perfect camouflage for what I was becoming. 3 minutes can feel like a lifetime when you're waiting for your world to shatter and rebuild itself. I stood on that terrace, counting heartbeats like a meditation, each pulse a reminder that I was alive, despite everyone's best efforts to convince me otherwise. The door opened again. This time it was Jessica, her heels clicking against the stone like a countdown. Sarah? Marcus said you were out here being yourself. She laughed at her own non-joke. We're about to do the slideshow, you know, then and now photos. Though I guess in your case, there's not much difference, is there? I turned to face her, really looking at her for the first time tonight. The Botox had frozen her face into a mask of perpetual surprise, and her diamonds caught the light like tears she'd never shed for anyone but herself. Do you remember the night of the Harvard rejection? I asked. She blinked, thrown by the non sequitur. What? Senior year, March 15th. It was raining. What does that have to do with anything? You wore your Yale acceptance letter on a t-shirt, I continued. Had it printed at that shop downtown, walked around all day making sure everyone saw it. So? I was proud. I earned that acceptance. Yes, I agreed, you did. Just like Marcus earned his. And David earned his Princeton one. And every single person in our class earned their futures. I paused. Except me, right? I just got rejected. From everywhere. Jessica shifted uncomfortably. Look, if this is about the bulletin board thing, that was Marcus, not... I know exactly who it was, I said quietly. I know who put the rejection letters up, who highlighted the key phrases, who added the commentary. I even know who took the photos of me crying in the bathroom and passed them around. That was 20 years ago, Sarah. We were kids. Yes, I said. We were. The difference is, You got to stay kids. I had to grow up that night. What are you talking about? I looked past her to the ballroom, where our former classmates moved like ghosts of their younger selves, trapped in the amber of their glory days. That night, after the bulletin board, after the photos, after Marcus's father called my mother to suggest I consider other options because I was bringing down the class average with my presence. You remember that part, right? Jessica's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. He didn't. He did. Your father co-signed the letter. For the good of the school's reputation, it said. I smiled, but it felt like breaking glass. That night, I sat on our bathroom floor with my mother's sleeping pills in one hand and my father's dog tags in the other. Sarah. I sat there for 3 hours, trying to decide which parent to disappoint. The dead one who believed I could be more, or the living one who'd have to find me. Jesus Christ, Sarah, I didn't. We didn't know. Of course you didn't, I said simply. Why would you? I was nobody. I was nothing. I was the thing you scraped off your shoe at the end of the day. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of laughter from inside. Someone had started the slideshow. I could see the light flickering through the windows, casting shadows that looked like memories. So what happened? Jessica whispered. Why didn't you? The army recruiter called, I said. Wrong number, actually. He was trying to reach someone named Sarah Chen. Mixed up the listings. But I answered, and he heard something in my voice. Asked if I was okay. I laughed and said I was nobody. He said, perfect. The army specializes in turning nobodies into somebodies. And you enlisted? Just like that? Not just like that. I told him I'd been rejected from everywhere, that I was worthless, that I had nothing to offer anyone. You know what he said? Jessica shook her head. He said, the best soldiers I've ever known were the ones who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Then he asked me something no one had ever asked before. What? He asked what I wanted to become. 2 minutes now. I could hear the distant thrum of rotor blades, still too far for anyone else to notice. So you joined the army, Jessica said, like she was trying to piece together a puzzle with missing pieces. That's actually kind of amazing, Sarah. I mean, good for you, finding your place and all. I didn't find my place, I corrected. I carved it out of stone with my bare hands. Do you know what basic training is like for someone who's been broken down their entire life? She shook her head. It's easy, I said. The drill sergeants scream, and you think, is that all? They try to break you, and you realize you arrived pre-shattered. They try to make you feel worthless, and you laugh because you've been worthless since you were 17. Every other recruit was crying for their mothers. I was crying with relief because finally, someone was going to teach me how to be strong. Sarah, I was good at it, I continued. Being nobody, being invisible, turns out those are valuable skills in certain professions. The girl who could disappear in crowded hallways could disappear in enemy territory. The one who learned to eat silence for breakfast could go days without speaking under interrogation training. The one who knew how to clean could sanitize a scene until no trace remained. You're scaring me, Jessica said. Good, I replied. Do you know what my drill sergeant said when I graduated top of my class? He said I was the quietest soldier he'd ever trained. Said I moved like a ghost, fought like a demon, and never once complained. He asked where I learned it. I told him high school. 1 minute. The rotor blades were louder now, close enough that Jessica glanced up, confused. But here's the thing about the army, I said. They don't care where you come from. They don't care who your father is or what car you drive or whether your clothes are polyester or silk. They care about one thing. Can you do the job when everything goes to hell? Is that a helicopter? Jessica asked, distracted. And I could, I said. Every job, every mission, every impossible task they threw at me, I completed. Because compared to surviving Westbridge Academy, everything else was easy. Sarah, there's definitely a helicopter. They tried to give me a medal after my first deployment, I interrupted. I turned it down, didn't want the attention, but they made me take the second one, and the third. By the fourth, I realized something. What? She was backing toward the door now, the sound of the approaching aircraft triggering some primal fear response. I realized I didn't have to be nobody anymore, but I chose to stay invisible anyway. Do you know why? She shook her head, hand on the door handle. Because invisible people see everything, we hear everything, we learn everything. And when we finally decide to become visible, the helicopter crested the building, its spotlight flooding the terrace in harsh white light. Jessica screamed, stumbling backward. Through the ballroom windows, I could see faces turning, champagne glasses freezing midway to lips. We become unstoppable, I finished. The Black Hawk descended with practiced precision, its roar drowning out the music inside. The side door slid open before the skids even touched the roof, and 3 figures in tactical gear emerged, moving with the fluid efficiency of people who'd done this 1,000 times before. "Ma'am," the lead operator said, snapping a salute. "Priority 1 recall. The president needs you in the Situation Room in 40 minutes." I returned the salute, muscle memory taking over. "Understood. Threat assessment? Level orange. Escalating. The Joint Chiefs are already assembled." Behind me, Jessica made a sound like all the air had been punched out of her lungs. The ballroom doors burst open, and our classmates flooded onto the terrace, Marcus at the front, his face a masterpiece of confusion and growing fear. "Sarah?" His voice cracked like we were teenagers again, but this time, he was the one who sounded small. "What is this?" I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time all night. Saw the bully who'd made my life hell, saw the man who'd never grown beyond it, saw the future he'd never have to question because it had been handed to him at birth. "This?" I gestured to the helicopter, to the soldiers, to the entire scene that had shattered their slideshow of glory days. "This is Tuesday." "I don't understand," he said. "I know," I replied. "You never did." The lead operator stepped forward. "Ma'am, we need to go." I nodded, then turned back to my frozen classmates one last time. They stood there in their designer clothes with their practiced smiles and their small lives, looking at me like I'd shapeshifted in front of them. Which, in a way, I had. "The rejection letters," I said, loud enough for all of them to hear over the rotor wash. "Every single one. I kept them. Had them framed. They hang in my office at the Pentagon, right next to the letter from the Secretary of Defense commending my service. Right next to the photo of me with the president. Right next to my father's dog tags and my mother's citizenship certificate." Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You know what the funny thing is?" I continued. "I never needed Harvard. I never needed any of it. All I needed was someone to tell me I was worth something. And when none of you would, I found people who would, people who measured worth in courage, not cash, in service, not status, in honor, not heritage." The operator touched my shoulder gently. "Ma'am?" "Coming," I said. As I walked toward the helicopter, I heard Jessica's voice, high and desperate. "Your name tag said Mitchell? You said you were Sarah Mitchell?" I paused at the aircraft door. I was, but Mitchell was my father's name, the janitor. The one you all laughed at. I smiled, and this time it felt real. "I'm General Sarah Chen now." Chen was my mother's name, the woman who worked 3 jobs and never once let me forget I was somebody. The last thing I saw before the door closed was Marcus, champagne glass slipping from nerveless fingers to shatter on the marble terrace, the golden liquid spreading across the stone like all his assumptions, pooling at his feet in a puddle of broken certainty. I didn't need their acceptance anymore. I needed their fear. The Black Hawk banked hard over the city, and I let myself have 30 seconds, exactly 30 seconds, to feel the savage satisfaction of their stunned faces before I locked it away in the same compartment where I kept all personal feelings during operations. "Apologies for the dramatic extraction, General," Lieutenant Colonel Martinez said over the headset. "We tried to reach you through normal channels, but—" "My phone was on silent," I said. "Social engagement. What's the situation?" "Developing rapidly. The Seychelles incident has escalated. Ambassador Chen is requesting immediate military advisory support, and the president wants your specific expertise on the—" He paused, glancing at the crew. "On the package we discussed last month." "The package?" 3 years of deep cover intelligence work, 17 coordinated international operations, and 1 very delicate political situation that could either stabilize an entire region or set it on fire. And they needed the woman who'd learned patience cleaning toilets and strategic thinking from surviving high school hallways. "ETA to Andrews?" I asked. 17 minutes. Air Force One is prepped and waiting." I nodded. already shifting mental gears from the personal to the professional. But as the city lights blurred past below, I found myself thinking about the strange path that had led from that bathroom floor with a handful of pills to a helicopter racing toward a military aircraft that would take me to shape world events. 20 years. 2 decades of becoming someone I'd never imagined, because imagining anything beyond survival had been a luxury I couldn't afford at 17. The first transformation happened in basic training. They'd shaved my head on day 1, stripping away the last remnants of the girl who'd tried so hard to fit into their world. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see Sarah Mitchell anymore. I saw potential. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez had taken one look at me and known. "You've been through some shit," she'd said on day 3, finding me doing perfect push-ups at 0300 while others slept. "Haven't you, Private?" "Yes, Drill Sergeant." "Good. Pain's just weakness leaving the body. Looks like most of yours already left." She wasn't wrong. Every insult they hurled, every impossible task they set, every moment designed to break us down. I'd faced worse in designer clothing and air conditioning. When they screamed, I heard Marcus's laughter and felt nothing. When they pushed us past exhaustion, I remembered cleaning floors until dawn and pushed harder. I finished basic training with honors I didn't advertise and skills I'd never expected. Turns out, when you've spent years becoming invisible to survive, you're already halfway to becoming special operations. The second transformation came in Afghanistan. First deployment, Kandahar province. I was 22, spoke basic Dari I'd learned in my off hours, and volunteered for every patrol that needed a female soldier to interact with local women. That's where I met Captain Chen. No relation, despite the shared name that would later become mine. "You're not like the others," she said after watching me spend 3 hours playing with village children while gathering intelligence. Their mothers whispered when they thought no one was listening. "I'm nobody special," I'd replied automatically. "Exactly," she'd said. "The special ones are the ones who think they're nobody. They're the ones who listen." She recommended me for intelligence training, then ranger school, then operations so classified they don't officially exist. Each step took me further from the girl who'd mopped floors and closer to someone who mopped up situations that could destabilize nations. But the name change, that came later, after the incident in Syria that earned me a Bronze Star and a new identity for security reasons. When they asked what name I wanted, I thought of my mother, still working 2 jobs despite my protests, still proud of her daughter, who served. "Chen," I'd said. "Sarah Chen." "Any particular reason?" the administrator had asked. "My mother's maiden name. She gave me life twice, once when I was born, once when she kept me from ending it. Seems right to carry her name into battle." The third transformation was the hardest, because rising through ranks meant becoming visible again, meant sitting in rooms where power was discussed casually over coffee, meant making decisions that affected thousands, sometimes millions. Meant being saluted by people who'd never know I once cleaned toilets to buy textbooks. The imposter syndrome hit hard at first. During my first Joint Chiefs meeting, I'd sat there thinking everyone could see through me, could smell the polyester and shame, could hear the echo of teenage laughter. But then Secretary of Defense Coleman had turned to me and said, "General Chen, you've been in country. What's your assessment?" And I'd realized they didn't see Sarah Mitchell. They saw General Chen, who'd earned every star through blood and sacrifice, and the kind of intelligence that comes from learning to read danger in the pause between words. "Brilliant tactical mind," one assessment read. "Exceptional ability to remain calm under pressure," said another. "Possesses rare combination of strategic thinking and ground-level understanding." What they didn't know was that I'd learned tactics from navigating high school hallways, pressure from standing still while Jessica poured soup on me, strategy from surviving 4 years of psychological warfare, with a smile. Back to the present. 3 minutes to Andrews, Martinez announced. I pulled out my secure phone, checking the preliminary briefs. The situation was worse than I'd thought. A perfect storm of political instability, military positioning, and economic pressure that required someone who understood not just warfare but human nature. Someone who could read the real meaning behind diplomatic smiles. Someone who'd learned that the most dangerous enemies were often the ones pretending to be friends. My phone buzzed with a personal message. Against protocol during operations, but the sender made me pause. Lam? Saw the news about the reunion. Mrs. Patterson called. Said you caused quite a scene. I'm proud of you, baby. Dad would be too. I smiled despite myself. Somehow, the Westbridge Gossip Network had already activated. By tomorrow, everyone would know. The nobody had become somebody. The girl they'd tried to bury had risen so far above them they needed aircraft to reach her level. Another message, this one from an unlisted number. Sarah, this is Jessica. I got your number from the alumni directory. I'm sorry, we're all sorry. We had no idea. I deleted it without responding. Apologies meant nothing now. They weren't sorry for what they'd done. They were sorry for who I'd become, despite it. The helicopter touched down on the tarmac where Air Force One waited, its engines already warming. I could see the Secret Service detail, the Air Force crew, the small army of people who'd been pulled from their lives because the world was on fire, and apparently, I was one of the few who knew how to hold a hose. As I unbuckled and prepared to disembark, Martinez handed me a garment bag. Your uniform, General. Thought you might want to change before the flight. I took it gratefully. Inside would be my dress blues, the ones with ribbons that told stories I couldn't, with stars that weighed more than anyone could imagine, with a name tape that read Chen in proud black letters. Thank you, Colonel. Ma'am? He hesitated. Forgive me for asking, but was that really your high school reunion? I met his eyes. Martinez was a good soldier, had been with my staff for 2 years. He'd earned an honest answer. Yes, I said simply. And they really had no idea who you were? What you've become? They knew exactly who I was, I corrected. That was the problem. They just never imagined I could become anything else. He shook his head. Their loss, ma'am. No, I said, standing to exit the aircraft. Their lesson. 20 minutes later, dressed in my uniform with its hard-earned decorations, I boarded Air Force One. The crew snapped to attention. The Secretary of State nodded gravely from his seat. The National Security Advisor was already deep in papers, preparing for the briefing we'd conduct at 30,000 feet. As the aircraft climbed into the night sky, I thought about the reunion probably continuing below. The slideshow of glory days, the careful social hierarchies, the same stories told the same way, because nothing in their lives had changed enough to create new ones. And I thought about Jessica's message. We had no idea. No, I thought, settling in to review classified reports that would shape tomorrow's headlines. You had no idea because you never bothered to look. Because invisible people don't register in your world until they become too big to ignore. I opened the first file, already compartmentalizing personal satisfaction to focus on the task at hand. There would be time later to process what had happened tonight. For now, there was work to do. A crisis to manage, lives to save. The same work I'd been doing for 2 decades while they posed for Instagram and complained about their luxury problems. General, the NSA advisor called. We're ready when you are. I stood, straightened my uniform, and walked to the briefing room, where decisions would be made that affected millions. Where my voice would carry weight that Marcus's money could never buy. Where the girl they'd called nothing would help determine something crucial. Gentlemen, I said, taking my seat at the table. Let's begin. Success is sweetest when served cold and unexpected. When heaven splits open. The crisis briefing lasted 3 hours. By the time we landed at a classified location I can't name, I'd helped draft a response strategy that would prevent a regional war, authorized an extraction operation for 37 intelligence assets, and coordinated with 4 allied nations on a joint response that would make headlines they'd never understand the true significance of. Outstanding work, General, the Secretary of State said as we prepared to disembark. The President will want to thank you personally once this stabilizes. Just doing my job, Mr. Secretary. He laughed, a tired sound from a man who'd seen too many near misses. Your job, right? Most people's jobs don't involve preventing World War III before breakfast. Most people haven't had my training, I replied. What I didn't say. Most people weren't trained by cruelty to read micro-expressions for survival, to anticipate attacks before they came, to find strength in the spaces between heartbeats where lesser people would break. The operation took 18 hours. 18 hours of calculated decisions, strategic deployments, and the kind of brinksmanship that would never make history books, because the best victories were the wars that never started. By hour 12, I'd been awake for 36 hours straight, running on coffee and the same determination that had gotten me through double shifts of cleaning and studying. "You should rest," Colonel Martinez suggested during a brief lull. "I'll rest when it's done," I said, the same words I'd told myself at 17, scrubbing floors at 3 a.m. with a calculus test at 8. By the time we'd achieved full operational success, prevented an international incident, and extracted all assets safely, another day had passed. 48 hours since I'd stood on that terrace in my simple black dress, being told I was nothing. "General Chen," the president's voice came through the secure line as we wrapped up. "Outstanding work. When you return to D.C., I'd like to discuss the new position we talked about." The new position. Director of a joint task force, so classified it didn't officially exist, coordinating international intelligence efforts that shaped policy at the highest levels. The kind of job that would put me in rooms where the real power lived, where decisions were made that rippled across generations. "I'll be there, Mr. President." "Good. And Sarah, I heard about the reunion. Sometimes the best revenge really is massive success." I smiled despite my exhaustion. "I prefer to think of it as aggressive self-improvement, sir." His laugh was genuine. "Get some rest, General. You've earned it." But rest would have to wait. The flight back to D.C. took 4 hours. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I finally allowed myself to check personal messages. My mother had called 6 times, the alumni network had exploded, and there were 17 emails from classmates who'd somehow found my official military address. I ignored them all except one, a message from someone I hadn't expected. "Sarah, this is David Kim. You probably don't remember me. I was the quiet kid who sat behind you in AP History. I wanted you to know that not everyone was laughing back then. Some of us saw what they did to you, and we were too cowardly to stand up. I've regretted it for 20 years. Seeing that helicopter land, knowing who you've become, it made me realize I've been carrying that shame all this time. You don't owe me forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that while they were trying to break you, you were teaching some of us what real strength looked like. Thank you for that lesson. David." I read it twice, then saved it. One voice of kindness in a chorus of cruelty. It didn't erase anything, but it reminded me that even in our darkest moments, someone might be watching, learning, growing from our example. The plane touched down at Andrews just after sunset. I'd been gone 52 hours, hadn't slept in nearly 60, and probably looked like I'd been through hell. Which, in a diplomatic sense, I had. "Car's waiting, General," the crew chief informed me. "Driver has orders to take you home." Home. A modest townhouse in Alexandria that I'd bought with combat pay, decorated with artifacts from places I'd served, filled with books and languages I'd learned to speak in countries I'd helped stabilize. Not the mansion they'd probably expected, but exactly what I needed. "Thank you, Chief." The drive took 40 minutes through DC traffic. I dozed fitfully, that half-sleep soldiers perfected where you rested but never fully disengaged. The driver, bless him, knew better than to make conversation. But as we pulled up to my house, I saw something that made me fully alert. Cars. Expensive ones. Parked outside my home like a luxury dealership had exploded. "Ma'am?" The driver said carefully, "Would you like me to call base security?" I studied the vehicles, then spotted the figure sitting on my porch steps. Armani suit wrinkled, 5 o'clock shadow past midnight, champagne stains still visible on his shirt. "Marcus." "No," I said. "It's fine, just some ghosts from the past." "If you're sure, ma'am. I've faced Taliban fighters and Russian mercenaries, Sergeant. I think I can handle a real estate developer having an existential crisis." He cracked a smile. "Roger that, General. I'll wait here until you're inside, just in case." I grabbed my bag and stepped out, still in my operational gear, black tactical pants, combat boots, unmarked jacket over body armor I hadn't bothered to remove. Not exactly the dress uniform from the helicopter, but perhaps more honest. This was who I really was beneath the stars and ribbons. Marcus stood as I approached, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before: fear. "Sarah?" He started. "General Chen," I corrected automatically. "General Chen." He swallowed hard. I've been here for 6 hours. Your neighbor threatened to call the police twice. Mrs. Rodriguez doesn't like loiterers. Can't say I blame her. I stopped at the bottom of my porch steps, looking up at him. Why are you here, Marcus? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that would have looked practiced if his hands weren't shaking. I couldn't stop thinking about what you said, about the rejection letters, about your father. And I realized something. He sat back down heavily, looking every one of his 47 years. I peaked at 17. Everything since then, the business, the money, the success, it's all been trying to recreate the feeling of being king of Westbridge Academy. I said nothing, just waited. 20 years of interrogation training had taught me the value of silence. But you, he continued, we tried to destroy you. We did destroy you. Or thought we did. And instead of staying broken, you became. He gestured helplessly. This, whatever this is, General Presidential Advisor, I googled you on the way here. What little isn't classified. Metals I can't even pronounce. Operations in places I can't find on a map. You became everything while I've been playing the same character since high school. Is this an apology? I asked. No, he said, surprising me. Because I don't think sorry covers it. I think. He looked up at me, and for the first time since we were children, before he learned cruelty was currency, I saw the real Marcus. I think I came here because I needed to see it was real. That you were real. That someone could take what we did and transform it into whatever you are now. I'm tired, I said simply. That's what I am now. A tired woman who's been awake for 60 hours preventing wars you'll never know almost happened. Jesus. He stood again, backing down the steps. I should go. I needed you to know that some of us understand now what we took from you, what we tried to take. You didn't take anything, I said. You gave me something. What? Purpose. Direction. The absolute certainty that I never wanted to be anything like you. I shouldered my bag. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a date with my bed and about 16 hours of sleep. Sarah, General, wait. He pulled out an envelope. The reunion committee wanted me to give you this. Apparently, there's some kind of award or honor or I don't want it. It's not from us, he said quickly. It's from the school. They want to name something after you, a scholarship or something for kids like... He couldn't finish the sentence. Kids like I was? He nodded. I took the envelope, not opening it. I'll think about it. That's more than we deserve. Yes, I agreed. It is. He walked to his car, a Bentley that probably cost more than most people's houses. At the door, he turned back. For what it's worth, he said, you won. No, I said. I survived. Then I evolved. Winning implies there was a competition. There wasn't. You were playing checkers while I was learning chess. You were fighting for popularity while I was fighting for purpose. We weren't even on the same board. He nodded slowly, got in his car, and drove away. I watched his taillights disappear, then finally climbed my porch steps. Mrs. Rodriguez's curtains twitched. She'd been watching the whole time, probably with her hand on her phone ready to call for help. It's okay, Mrs. R. I called softly. Just old ghosts. You sure, Misha? Her voice carried through her window. That pendejo was here all day. I'm sure. Thank you for watching out. Always, she said. You military kids got to stick together. Her son had served too. Came back from Iraq, missing pieces. Some visible, some not. I'd helped him get into a treatment program, pulled some strings to get him the care he deserved. She'd been watching my 6 ever since. Inside my house, I dropped my bag, hung up my jacket, and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of the last 60 hours. In the span of 3 days, I'd faced my past, prevented an international crisis, and discovered that the ghosts I'd been running from were just shadows, painful but powerless unless I gave them permission to hurt me. My phone buzzed. Another message from Jessica. We had no idea. This time I responded, I know. That was the point. Then I turned off my phone, ran a hot bath, and let myself sink into water that wasn't trying to drown me, in a house I'd earned, wearing scars both visible and invisible that told the story of who I'd become. Tomorrow there would be new crises, new challenges, new battles to fight, in rooms where the stakes were measured in lives rather than social status. But tonight, I was just Sarah Chen, tired soldier, finally home from wars both foreign and domestic. As I closed my eyes, I thought I heard the distant sound of helicopter blades. But it was just the ceiling fan, turning lazy circles in the quiet night, marking time in a life that had turned out nothing like anyone expected. Least of all me. Their faces were a masterpiece I'd paint in my memory forever. Sleep came in fragments, punctuated by decades of training that kept part of my mind always alert, always listening. But for once, the sounds were peaceful. Mrs. Rodriguez's television murmuring through thin walls, the distant hum of DC traffic, the familiar creaks of a house that had become more home than anywhere I'd lived. When I finally woke, 16 hours had passed. Sunlight streamed through windows I'd forgotten to curtain, and my phone showed 37 missed calls, most from numbers I didn't recognize. The Westbridge network had fully activated, spreading news of my revelation like wildfire through their carefully maintained social circles. I ignored them all, making coffee in the same battered pot I'd carried through 3 deployments. Some habits were worth keeping. The envelope Marcus had left sat on my kitchen counter, heavy with whatever gesture the school thought would absolve them. I opened it while the coffee brewed, scanning the letterhead that still made my stomach clench reflexively. Dear General Chen, it began. The Westbridge Academy Board of Directors wishes to extend our deepest congratulations on your extraordinary service to our nation. I skimmed the platitudes until I reached the meat of it. They wanted to name their new scholarship program after me. The Sarah Chen Excellence Fund, designed to provide full rides for economically disadvantaged students who show exceptional promise. 20 years too late, but perhaps 20 years exactly on time for some other 17-year-old cleaning floors and crying in bathroom stalls. My doorbell rang before I could decide how to feel about it. Through the peephole, I saw a face I hadn't expected. My mother, still in her hospital scrubs from the night shift, holding a box of donuts from the shop near her work. I opened the door and she pulled me into a hug that smelled like antiseptic and the same drugstore perfume she'd worn my entire life. My baby, she whispered in Mandarin, the language of our private moments. My brilliant, brave baby. Mama, I said, reverting to childhood in her arms. How did you? Mrs. Patterson called everyone. That whole phone tree they used to use to gossip about us. Now it's spreading news of what you've become. She pulled back, cupping my face in hands that had aged too fast from too much work. A general, my daughter, a general. Come in, I said. Coffee's ready. We sat at my small kitchen table, sharing donuts that were too sweet and coffee that was too strong, and she told me about the calls. How Jessica's mother had stammered through an apology 20 years overdue. How Marcus's father had asked if I might consider speaking at the next board meeting. How the whole toxic ecosystem of Westbridge society was reconsidering their hierarchies in light of new information. You should see them, she said, eyes bright with vindication. The same people who suggested you transfer to public school, now claiming they always knew you were special. They didn't know anything, I said. No, she agreed. But I did. Your father did. We knew who you were, even when you forgot. I almost gave up, I admitted, the words easier after all these years. That night with the pills. I almost... But you didn't. She gripped my hand. You stayed. You fought. You became everything they said you couldn't be. I became everything despite them, I corrected. Not because of them. Does it matter? She gestured around my home, at the photographs from deployments, the certificates of commendation, the life I'd built from the ashes of adolescent cruelty. You won my heart. Whatever the reason, you won. Marcus said the same thing, her eyes sharpened. Marcus came here? Last night, sat on my porch for 6 hours waiting to, I don't know, apologize, understand, justify? What did you tell him? The truth, that we were never in competition. That while he was fighting to stay king of a very small hill, I was learning to move mountains. She smiled, the same fierce pride that had carried me through the darkest moments. That's my girl. We talked for 2 more hours, catching up on the mundane details that mattered more than medals. Her work at the hospital, my neighbor's son's progress, the small victories and defeats of daily life. She didn't ask about the helicopter or the crisis I'd been pulled away to handle. She knew better than to ask about things I couldn't share. As she prepared to leave for her next shift, she still worked too much, still refused my offers of financial help with stubborn pride. She paused at my door. The scholarship, she said. You'll say yes? You read the letter? I'm your mother. Of course I read it. She smiled. Some other child needs what you became. Don't let pride rob them of that chance. After she left, I sat with the letter again, weighing the politics of it. They wanted to use my name to absolve their guilt, to point to me as proof their system worked. But Mama was right. Some kid was sitting in their basement apartment right now, wondering if they'd ever be more than their parents' income bracket. I drafted my response on official Pentagon letterhead, agreeing to the scholarship with conditions. Full ride meant full ride. Books, uniforms, lunch money, everything. The recipients would be selected by committee that included no current Westbridge parents, and I would personally mentor each student, ensuring they had what I'd lacked, someone in their corner who understood both where they came from and where they could go. Additionally, I wrote, I will be establishing a parallel fund for the children of military service members, emergency responders, and civil servants. Those who serve deserve to see their children rise. Let them choke on their charity when they realized it came with accountability. That evening, I finally returned Jessica's calls. She answered on the first ring, breathless with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. Sarah, General, I don't know what to call you. Sarah's fine, I said. We're not in high school anymore. No, she agreed quickly. We're not. Listen, I wanted to. God, this is hard. I've practiced this speech 100 times since the reunion, and I still don't know how to say it. Try honesty, I suggested. It's surprisingly effective. She laughed, a sound with edges. Okay, honestly, I'm terrified. We all are. Not of you, well, maybe a little of you, but of what you represent. Do you understand what you did? Prevented an international incident and saved roughly 3,000 lives. But that's classified, so... No, she interrupted. At the reunion, you made us all realize we're still the same people we were at 17. Same friends, same opinions, same tiny worlds. But you transformed into something we can't even comprehend. You made us see ourselves clearly, and we look pathetic. You look human, I corrected. Flawed and cruel and human. The problem isn't what you are, it's that you never grew beyond it. How? Her voice cracked. How did you grow beyond it? We broke you. I know we did. I saw it happen. You broke Sarah Mitchell, I said, but she was always meant to be temporary. A chrysalis. You just sped up the process. I poured soup on you, she whispered. Every Tuesday for 2 years I poured soup on you and laughed. Tomato, I confirmed. It stained everything. I became an expert at getting tomato stains out of polyester. Jesus Christ. That's a skill that translates, by the way. You'd be amazed how often I've needed to get stains out of things in my line of work. Blood's actually easier than tomato soup. Fun fact. Are you making jokes about this? Would you prefer I list every slight, every cruelty, every moment you and yours tried to convince me I was nothing? I have an eidetic memory, Jessica. I remember every word, every laugh, every carefully orchestrated humiliation. I could recite them chronologically if you'd like. God, no. Then yes, I'm making jokes, because the alternative is acknowledging that you systematically tortured a child for the crime of being poor. And I don't think either of us is equipped for that conversation. Silence stretched between us, filled with 20 years of unspoken truths. I have a daughter, she said finally. 16. Just started at Westbridge. Full tuition, of course, legacy admission, all the advantages. She came home last week crying because some girls were making fun of a scholarship kid. And all I could think was, God, I taught her this. Not directly, but she learned it from watching me. So unteach it, I said simply. How? Start by telling her the truth, that 20 years ago you were a bully, that you hurt someone who couldn't fight back, that you were wrong. Then tell her what happened at the reunion. Tell her that the girl you tortured became someone extraordinary not because of what you did, but despite it. Tell her that cruelty is weakness, and kindness requires strength. Then maybe, she'll be better than we were. Is that forgiveness? No, I said. Forgiveness implies I carried anger. I didn't. I carried purpose. You want forgiveness? Earn it. Make sure no other kid goes through what I did. Use your influence, your money, your legacy status to change the culture that created us both. Both? You were a child too, Jessica. A child taught that cruelty was currency and compassion was weakness. The system that failed me also failed you, just in different ways. She was crying now, soft sobs that reminded me we'd all been damaged by those halls, just in different directions. "The scholarship," she managed. "Can I contribute? Anonymously?" "Of course, but I have a better idea." "What? Your husband's a surgeon, right? Volunteer at the free clinic in Southeast. See how the other half lives. Let your daughter see you serving people who can't pay you back. Show her what real worth looks like." I could do that. Good. Now I need to go. I have a meeting with the Joint Chiefs in an hour, and traffic's going to be hell. Sarah? One more thing. What you said about us peaking at 17 while you were just beginning? Were you always planning that? The dramatic revelation? I thought about it, about the strange alchemy of opportunity and preparation. I wasn't planning anything, I admitted. I just lived my life. Served my country. Did the job. The helicopter showing up at the reunion? Pure coincidence. But being ready for it? That was 20 years of preparation. Success isn't about planning the perfect revenge, Jessica. It's about becoming someone who doesn't need it. But you got it anyway. I got something better, I corrected. I got perspective. You see me as someone who rose above my circumstances. I see you as someone trapped by yours. Which of us really won? I hung up before she could answer, already shifting gears for the meeting ahead. There would be maps to study, strategies to devise, decisions that ripple across continents. The girl who'd cleaned their floors now held national security in her hands, and the poetry of that wasn't lost on me. But first, I had one more call to make. Westbridge Academy, Office of Development. How may I help you? This is General Chen. I'm calling about the scholarship fund. Oh, General, yes, we're so excited about. I accept, I interrupted. With conditions, I'll be sending a detailed proposal, but I have one immediate requirement. Of course, anything. The first recipient should be whoever's currently working janitorial to pay for their education. Start where I started. Give them what I never had. Someone who believes they're worth more than the floors they clean. That's beautiful, General. No, I said, thinking of my father's hands, scarred from service and rough from cleaning. That's justice. The best revenge isn't served at all. It's lived. 5 years later. The Medal of Honor ceremony was small by design. The operation that earned it would remain classified for another 20 years. The names of the dead known only to their families and those of us who'd lived through those 72 hours in a place I still can't name. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty, the president read, his voice carrying across the rose garden, where gathered dignitaries tried not to think about how close we'd come to losing everything. I stood at attention, muscle memory overriding the surreal nature of the moment. Somewhere in the small crowd, my mother wept silently, clutching the arm of Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd become her constant companion at these events. They'd bonded over their military children, their shared understanding of what it cost to love someone who served. The medal was heavier than I'd expected when they placed it around my neck. Or maybe that was just the weight of the names it carried. The ones who didn't make it home, whose sacrifice would never be fully acknowledged outside classified briefings and private grief. General Chen exemplifies the highest traditions of military service, the president continued. Her actions saved countless lives and prevented a crisis that would have destabilized an entire region. While the details must remain classified, let me be clear. We owe her a debt that can never be fully repaid. After the ceremony, during the reception I couldn't escape from, I found myself in conversation with the Secretary of Education. We were discussing the expansion of the scholarship program when a familiar voice cut through the ambient chatter. Sarah? I turned to find David Kim, the quiet kid from AP History who'd sent that unexpected message 5 years ago. He wore the uniform of a lieutenant colonel now, JAG Corps insignia gleaming. David, I said, genuinely pleased, I heard you'd joined up. After the reunion, he admitted. Watching that helicopter land, seeing who you'd become, I realized I'd spent 20 years being the same coward who wouldn't stand up to Marcus. Figured it was time to serve something bigger than myself. And? Best decision I ever made. Though I should warn you, you're something of a legend among the junior officers. The general who came from nothing and conquered everything. I didn't conquer anything, I corrected. I just refused to be conquered. He smiled. I've been meaning to thank you. Your story, not the classified parts, just the fact of you. It gave a lot of us permission to reimagine ourselves. Before I could respond, an aide appeared at my elbow. General, the First Lady would like a word. I nodded to David. Duty calls, but find me later. I want to hear about your journey. The rest of the reception blurred together. Handshakes and photographs, carefully worded conversations about things we couldn't discuss, the strange dance of power and protocol that had become second nature. It wasn't until later, back in my office at the Pentagon, that I allowed myself to truly process the day. The medal sat on my desk next to the framed collection of rejection letters, those twin poles of my journey. On the wall, new additions had joined them. Photos from scholarship recipients who'd graduated and gone on to their own successes, letters from soldiers who'd served under me, commendations that mattered less than the lives they represented. My secure phone buzzed. Another crisis somewhere, another fire that needed fighting. But first I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a worn notebook, my father's from his Ranger days. His handwriting, faded but still legible, filled pages with observations about leadership, service, sacrifice. On the last page, written shortly before the cancer took him, were words I'd memorized but still needed to see. Sarah Bear, they'll try to make you small. Don't let them. The world needs people who've been broken and refuse to stay that way. Be one of them. I tried, Dad. I whispered to the empty office. I hope I made you proud. A knock interrupted my reverie. My new aide, Second Lieutenant Maya Patel, entered with a stack of briefing papers. She moved with the careful precision of someone still learning to navigate these halls, reminding me of myself at that age. Ma'am, the briefing for tomorrow's Joint Task Force meeting, she said. Then, hesitantly. Also, there's someone in the outer office. Says she's from Westbridge Academy? Something about the scholarship ceremony next week? I'd forgotten about that. The 5th anniversary of the program, where I'd speak to the current recipients and their families. Another obligation in a calendar full of them, but this one mattered differently. Send her in, Lieutenant? And Maya? Good work on the Estonia analysis. Your insights on the cultural factors were particularly valuable. She beamed, young enough that praise still visibly mattered. Thank you, ma'am. I'm learning from the best. After she left, I wondered if she knew her own story. Parents who'd fled poverty in Gujarat, working 3 jobs each to put her through state school, ROTC, her ticket to something bigger. We all had our origin stories, our moments of breaking and becoming. The woman from Westbridge entered, not someone I recognized, young enough to have come after my time. She carried a folder thick with success stories, updates on the 47 students who'd benefited from the program so far. General Chen, I'm Emma Walsh, the new Director of Student Support. I wanted to brief you on the ceremony and share some updates on our recipients. Please sit. She spread photos across my desk, young faces caught between childhood and possibility, wearing the same uniform I'd once cleaned floors to afford. But their eyes were different from what mine had been. These kids had hope, support, someone in their corner from day one. This is Jamal Williams, she said, pointing to a photo of a young man in a MIT sweatshirt. Full ride to engineering school, just like you arranged. He wants to design prosthetics for veterans. And her. Maria Santos, pre-med at Johns Hopkins, she wrote in her essay that she wants to serve in the military medical corps. Said something about following in the footsteps of those who proved service comes in many forms. We went through each file, each story of transformation that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with possibility. These kids would never know the weight of being nobody, because from their first day at Westbridge, someone had told them they were somebody. There's something else, Emma said carefully. Marcus Fitzgerald has been asking to be involved with the program. He's offered significant funding, mentorship, whatever we need. But given the history... What history? I asked. She blinked. Your history. What happened when you were students? Ancient history, I said. If he wants to help, let him. The program isn't about me or him or what happened 20 years ago. It's about them. I gestured to the photos. Everything else is just noise. After she left, I stood at my window, looking out over the Potomac. Somewhere in the city, Marcus was probably still trying to atone for sins he'd only recently recognized. Jessica was likely at the free clinic, learning that worth had nothing to do with wealth. The rest of our classmates had scattered to their various futures, some changed by that night at the reunion, others still trapped in the amber of their glory days. And me? I was here, in an office where decisions affected millions, wearing stars earned in blood and sacrifice, carrying a medal that represented the best and worst of humanity. My phone buzzed again. The crisis that had been simmering was boiling over. Time to go to work, to be the person I'd become through alchemy of pain and purpose. But first, I pulled out my personal phone and scrolled to a photo from last week, me with the latest scholarship recipient, a girl named Isha, whose mother cleaned office buildings at night and whose father had never come home from Afghanistan. In the photo, Isha wore the Westbridge uniform like armor, her chin raised in defiance of anyone who might try to make her small. "Don't let them," I said to her image, echoing my father's words. "Be broken if you must, but never stay that way." Then I gathered my files, straightened my uniform, and walked toward whatever crisis awaited. General Sarah Chen, former nobody, current somebody, forever proof that the best revenge isn't planned or served or even acknowledged. It's simply lived, one day at a time, in service to something greater than the small people who tried to break you. When you don't need revenge anymore, that's when you know you've truly won. The Westbridge Academy auditorium hadn't changed much in 30 years. Same red velvet seats, same mahogany stage, same oil portraits of distinguished alumni lining the walls. They'd added my portrait last year, despite my protests. General Sarah Chen in dress blues looking like someone who belonged there. The irony wasn't lost on me. General Chen? A young voice pulled me from my observations. "I'm supposed to escort you backstage." The student couldn't have been more than 15, wearing the same uniform I'd once bled to afford, moving with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned their right to be here. Her name tag read, Aisha Williams, scholarship recipient. "Lead the way, Aisha," I said, recognizing her from the photos. She'd grown in the 5 years since that picture, carried herself differently now. "How's the engineering program?" Her face lit up. "Amazing. I'm actually working on a project with Jamal. He's back from MIT for the ceremony. We're designing adaptive technology for veterans with PTSD. My dad would have." She stopped, swallowed. "He would have loved it." "I'm sure he would have," I said gently. Backstage was controlled chaos. Emma Walsh directing traffic, scholarship recipients from the past decade gathering for the group photo, current students stealing glances at their predecessors who'd gone on to colleges they were now dreaming of. And in the corner, wearing an expensive suit that somehow looked uncomfortable on him now, stood Marcus Fitzgerald. He'd aged more in the last 10 years than in the previous 20. The easy arrogance had been replaced by something quieter, more thoughtful. He was deep in conversation with a scholarship recipient, and I heard him say, "The biggest mistake I ever made was thinking I knew who people were before they had a chance to show me." Jessica appeared at my elbow, no longer the polished socialite from the reunion. Her designer clothes had been replaced by practical scrubs. She'd gone back to school, become a nurse practitioner, now ran the free clinic where she'd started volunteering. "Funny how things change," she said quietly, watching Marcus. "He's actually good with the kids. Tells them about every mistake he made, uses himself as a cautionary tale. They love him for it." "Redemption's possible for anyone who wants it badly enough," I said. "Is that what this is? Redemption?" "No," I said. "It's growth. Redemption implies erasing the past. Growth means learning from it." The ceremony itself was a blur of speeches and applause. I spoke about service, about the strength that comes from struggle, about the importance of lifting others as you climb. The scholarship recipients sat in the front row, 57 of them now, each carrying their own story of transformation. But it was Jamal Williams who stole the show, speaking about how the program had changed not just his life, but his family's entire trajectory. His mother was in the audience, crying as her son talked about watching her come home exhausted from cleaning offices, determined that her children would have more. "General Chen taught us that where you start doesn't determine where you finish," he said. "But more importantly, she taught us that success without service is just selfishness with better PR." The audience laughed, but the truth of it hung in the air like a benediction. After the ceremony, at the reception, I couldn't escape. I found myself in an unexpected conversation with David Kim and several other classmates who'd taken their own journeys of growth. We stood in a loose circle. No longer the teenagers who'd walked these halls, all of us changed by time and choice and the strange alchemy of that reunion night. "Do you ever think about it?" David asked. "What would have happened if that helicopter hadn't shown up when it did?" "Nothing," I said. "Or everything. The helicopter was just theater. The real revelation would have happened eventually, in some other way, at some other time. Truth has a way of surfacing." "But the timing," someone else said. "It was perfect, like something out of a movie." I smiled. "Life's not a movie, it's messier, harder, more beautiful." That night wasn't about the helicopter, or the drama, or even the revelation. It was about 20 years of choosing to become something more than what they told us we were. Marcus had joined our circle, still hesitant after all these years, still learning how to exist in spaces where he wasn't automatically the center. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what you said that night, that we were playing checkers while you were learning chess." "And?" "You were wrong," he said, surprising me. "We weren't even playing checkers, we were just existing, taking up space. You were the only one actually playing anything, actually fighting for anything. The rest of us were just there." "Being there is a choice too," I said. "You could have been anywhere else." "No," he said quietly, "I couldn't. That was the problem. I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what was expected. You were the only one who broke free." "I wasn't the only one," I corrected, looking around the circle. "Just the first." The reception wound down, but I lingered, watching the scholarship kids interact with the current students, seeing the torch pass in real time. Aisha was showing younger students her engineering sketches, her enthusiasm infectious. Maria Santos was surrounded by pre-med hopefuls, dispensing advice with the authority of someone who'd walked their path. "General?" Emma Walsh appeared with a final request. The students were hoping for a group photo. "With you in the center?" "No," I said, then softened it with a smile. "I'll stand to the side. They should be in the center. This is their story now." As we assembled for the photo, I thought about time and transformation, about the strange journey from mopping these floors to standing here as someone who'd helped change lives. The photographer counted down, and in that suspended moment before the flash, I saw it all clearly. Marcus, finally learning humility at 47, Jessica, finding purpose and service to others, David, discovering courage in uniform, the scholarship kids, bright with possibility. And me, no longer the girl who'd been broken here, no longer even the woman who'd revealed herself that night at the reunion. Just Sarah Chen, servant and soldier, proof that the best revenge is a life so well lived that revenge becomes irrelevant. The flash went off, capturing us all in that moment of possibility. And somewhere in the light, I swear I heard my father's voice, carried on the whisper of time and memory. "Don't let them make you small." I smiled. "Never did, Dad. Never will." Later, as I walked to my car, Isha caught up with me. "General Chen, I wanted to say thank you, not just for the scholarship, but for showing us it's possible to become more than what people expect." "You don't need to thank me," I said. "Just pay it forward. When you're designing those prosthetics, remember there's some other kid out there cleaning floors and dreaming of more. Be the person who tells them they're worth it." She nodded solemnly, then surprised me with a quick hug before running back to her friends. I drove home through streets I'd once walked because I couldn't afford the bus, past the recruiting station where my life had changed, through a city that held all my ghosts and all my glories. My phone sat silent on the passenger seat. No crises tonight, no wars to prevent, no immediate calls to duty. Just a woman driving home from her past, carrying her future lightly, knowing that tomorrow there would be new battles, but tonight there was peace. At a red light, I saw my reflection in the window and smiled at the woman looking back. Scarred, but not broken, tired, but not defeated, successful beyond her wildest dreams, but still hungry for the next challenge, the next opportunity to serve. When you no longer need revenge, that's when you know you've won. When you use your victory to lift others, that's when you know you've transcended. And when you can look at those who tried to break you with compassion instead of contempt, that's when you know you're free. The light turned green. I drove on, leaving the past in my rearview mirror where it belonged. Eyes fixed on the road ahead, where new stories waited to be written, new lives waited to be changed, new battles waited to be won. Not with anger or vengeance, but with the quiet strength of someone who'd learned that the best revenge isn't a dish served cold. It's a life served well.